Hello, DeMatha Nation. My name is Corey Puffett, DeMatha class of 2010 and current faculty member. A few weeks ago, we interviewed a few stags who were in the mix for the NFL draft. We promised then that we would return to interview some DeMatha people outside of the athletic arena. So here we are. We hope to continue doing this as a way to keep the DeMatha community engaged as we continue to manage during this pandemic. This series of interviews includes graduates who, in their own special ways during this crisis, are trying to make a difference. I'm joined today by staff member Ben Flary, class of 2011, who is helping me interview these graduates. Today's guest is Robert Kavetsky, class of 1971. Hey, Bob, great to have you today.
Hey, good to be here, Corey. Thanks for having me.
I'm really happy to get a chance to talk with you and some of our other DeMatha community members who are stepping up in various ways throughout this pandemic. You are the president and executive director of Energetics Technology Center, and ABC7 recently did a story about new decontamination procedures adopted by the Hyattsville Police Department and the role that your firm has played in those procedures. How exactly did Energetics Technology Center get involved in helping our first responders with these new disinfection protocols?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's actually a result of another DeMatha connection. Another DeMatha grad, Kevin Davis, and I have a professional relationship. He did a little bit of consulting work with us a few years ago. And, like a lot of people, we're all trying to figure out how can we help, various communities. I have a brother-in-law who's a captain in the Anne Arundel County Police Force, Fred Plitt, and Kevin was our police commissioner in Anne Arundel County and then police commissioner in Baltimore. And so we had a call one day, and Kevin recommended if we wanted to try to do something with the police force, do something on a pilot scale with a smaller police force, and that also had a forward-thinking police chief. And that led us to the Hyattsville Police Department, which has about 50 officers, and Chief Amal Awad, who's definitely a very forward-thinking, progressive type of police chief. And so we went from an initial discussion with them, like right at the 1st, 2nd of April, to a week or two later, implementing a system I'll tell you a little bit about in a second, to help their police officers deal with COVID-19.
Yeah, so I mean, that kind of leads me into my next question, which is what those procedures entail, and then how Energetics is involved in actually creating those disinfection protocols, and whether any of those can be used in our own day-to-day lives.
Yeah, so good question. So like what most engineers and scientists do when they're coming into something new, the first thing is you try to define the problem. And we really saw there were two problems. And the big problem though was just the avalanche of information that's out there, and how do you distill that information down to something that's practical and practically useful? Because the police officers get some guidance from on high, but they really don't have protocols, at least Hyattsville didn't, for how do you make sure when you're done with your shift and you want to go home that you're going to not potentially infect your family when you leave the job. And then the second thing was just putting in place a process that we would put the police officers through. So we wound up developing three things for the Hyattsville Police Department. One was a decontamination process that we developed a flow chart for that, so that we put the officers through when they come off of the shift. In the case of Hyattsville Police Department, they all take their cars home, so we had to also make sure the cars were clean too, inside and out, primarily inside, wherever they're touching things. So we put together a decontamination process, put together a kit of supplies that the officers could take out on patrol with them. So if they were coming in contact with people who potentially had COVID, how would they handle that situation? And then the third thing, put together what we call smart cards, which are laminated 5x7 cards, which had these processes detailed. And a lot of this information, actually, we produced twice as many cards as they had officers, so they could take them home to use with their families. Because a lot of this is just practical, good information that, my folks went out on the web and went to CDC sites and, all the vetted sites, if you will, to make sure we could boil that information down to make it useful for the officers, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult during this time. There's so much information. There's good information, there's misinformation, and it can be difficult sometimes to really figure out which is which. Even vetted sites like CDC sometimes come under some scrutiny, but overall, I mean, you have to start somewhere, and you have to start with the scientists who are actually on the front lines doing this work, and trust that they're doing their best to give us good information.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I have a lot of what I call the pointy head types, scientists and engineers who love searching through that kind of information and making sure it's good quality information before we pass it along.
Now, Bob, I know Energetics is a nonprofit research and engineering firm. So before the coronavirus pandemic, what sorts of projects and initiatives was Energetics involved with?
Yeah, probably a good example, one of our more recent projects is we're looking at how you can apply artificial intelligence and machine learning to developing new energetic materials. So for the lay people, energetic materials are explosives and propellants. So the boom end of weapons, right? That's what we primarily work on. And so we're looking at how you can apply some of this artificial intelligence work that's going on to developing new energetic materials for the Defense Department. So that's the kind of project we love sinking our teeth into. The other thing we kind of do though is we help the Defense Department also partner with outside organizations. And so we have a pretty broad network across the country, and certainly within the state of Maryland. A lot of people don't know that in the state of Maryland, we have 72 federal laboratories, which is by far the highest number of federal laboratories in any state in the country. And so we have a really, really deep technical bench right here in our own backyard that we know how to draw upon when we need expertise in areas where we might not have it at ETC.
Awesome. I want to talk a little bit about your time at DeMatha as well. And you're a 1971 grad. So I'm curious to hear about some of your favorite memories from your time as a student. Yeah,
well, the reason I'm smiling is I'll share with you a quick story I believe I shared with Ben. But yeah, I had a lot of great memories at DeMatha. I did play football there. I was a little guy when I was at DeMatha. I didn't hit my growth spurt until I went to college. So when I graduated, I was 5'10" and weighed 140. I was a defensive back, and I would always make sure I stayed out of the way of all those linemen. I was more like the fly that on the elephants behind, if you will. But probably one of my classic stories, the classic story is we had a new teacher, I forget what year it was, maybe junior year, Rocco Manella, who turned out to be very influential in my life. And Rocco came into chemistry class one day, and Rocco was a hippie. I mean, he had long hair. This is the days when we all had long hair. And I was in the back of the classroom, and I shouted out, "Hey, Rocco." And I didn't see, right behind Rocco was Joe Bierman, the head of the chemistry department, but equally importantly, the football coach. And Joe started shouting in the class, "Who said that? Who said that?" And of course, I didn't raise my hand, right? So he starts walking down my aisle because he kind of knew the area of the classroom where it was. And he started yelling at the kid behind me. I'm finally thinking, I can't let this kid get demolished. So I raised my hand, and he physically grabbed me and my desk and threw me out in the hallway. And I thought he was going to come out in the hallway and beat the crap out of me. And so he said, "Get your ass up to the principal's office. And if I ever hear you do that again, I'm going to knock your freaking teeth out." So I said, "Aye, Mr. Bierman."
That's great. That's
oh
awesome.
My goodness.
So that was a very indelible memory. But I do want to tell a quick Rocco Manella story. I know we don't want to be too long, but
take your time.
So my senior year at DeMatha, and Rocco was a wonderful teacher. He made physics and calculus easy, and I had actually been accepted at West Point, and so I was really debating. I didn't want to go to West Point, and but West Point's free, and I was the oldest of 5 kids. My dad's an Army Sergeant Major, so it's not like money was falling out of his pockets, and so I was agonizing over this. And Rocco saw me one day, and he goes, "Bob," he goes, "what you really ought to do," he says, "go to Catholic U, major in engineering and date the nurses. And so I went to Catholic U, majored in engineering, and married a Catholic U nurse.
Good advice right there from
Yeah,
Rocco.
Rocco gave me, and I didn't know it at the time, he gave me all the life advice I needed, right?
Apparently.
So, yeah. So,
would you say that he was your favorite teacher then?
yeah, I mean, there were a lot of good ones, but I would have to say that, you know, he just made physics and calculus easy. And that's a real gift. And I had many good teachers at DeMatha, many. I mean, it's really strong. Most people don't know this, but you guys know it's a very good academic school. I mean, I know we have a big athletic reputation, but it really prepares you for college very well. So.
Now, Bob, how do you feel DeMatha helped shape you and prepare you for your life since graduating from DeMatha?
Yeah, well, you know, well, of course, I was in therapy for 5 years after Mr. Bierman threw me out in the hallway, but beyond that, that's a joke. I was very but, you know, I think having such a well-rounded education was really important. And I went to Catholic U, and I similarly benefited at Catholic U from, you know, being exposed to more than just science and engineering. And I've actually written with other folks 9 or 10 books now. And so and actually I was thinking, as you and I were talking, we were all talking before the interview started, I actually wrote a couple columns for the DeMatha Stag when I was there.
Really?
They call it Kavetsky's Corner. I was writing about the football team, and I'll have to see if I can find some of those.
Nice.
But yeah, I think having such a well-rounded, you know, education really equipped me for more than just engineering work. You know, just to really have a very good, solid career, if you will. And so I'm really, really appreciative of grounding in the humanities and other things. Yeah. I mean, I had Morgan Wittenford as a history teacher, and a lot of people didn't know he was a great history teacher. I mean, he was just as good a history teacher as he was a basketball coach.
Absolutely.
And so I was fortunate to have Morgan as he was my homeroom teacher as well, freshman year. So
Wow.
that was kind of neat.
That's awesome.
Yeah. 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 I'm glad to see the model still is working and that DeMatha is being successful.
Oh yeah, I mean, Ben and I both fairly recent graduates, and we're both back working at the school, and we love it. And you know, DeMatha has been such an important part of our lives as well. You know, we just couldn't stay away.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
Yeah. So thank you very much for your time. I know you are a busy man with Energetics Technology Center and everything that you're doing, and we really appreciate everything you're doing to help our first responders, everything that all of our alumni are doing to try and help during this pandemic.
Yeah, well, happy to be here, and you guys be safe. That's the main thing, right?
Yes, absolutely. Sir. You do the same.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.
One DeMatha.
One DeMatha. There we go.
Hello, DeMatha family. Thank you for joining me and Ben Fleury for this series of interviews celebrating DeMatha alumni who are using their skills to help their communities through this pandemic. We hope to continue producing these interviews for our community, so if you or anybody you know is a DeMatha alum and are doing something to help your community during this crisis, please contact me or Ben Fleury. Our email addresses are at the bottom of your screen and in the YouTube video description. We'd love to hear from you and have a conversation with you for the DeMatha community as we celebrate all of the things, big and small, we are doing to help each other through this difficult time.